Hey there, I'm Mish and I'm a Trekkie, and this is Lower Decks episode review for today, October, I can't even remember what day it is, the 7th. It's a Thursday, that's all I really truly know. And that I'm getting on an airplane in like 4 hours. So, yay. Okay, so, this I actually really enjoyed today's episode. And actually, before I even go any further, I gotta warn people. Spoilers from here on out. Okay, so if you have not watched the episode, go watch the episode. This season has gotten like it was really good, and then it got kind of dumb, and it's just been getting better. So yeah, so go watch the episode. I don't, was it, how would you pronounce that in Klingon? Wedge Duj. I don't know if there's a guttural sound in there. It's been a long time since I took Klingon, but I knew that wedge meant 3, and I couldn't remember what Duj meant, but Rob, basically he cheated and looked it up, and it means ships. So 3 ships. Go watch the episode if you haven't seen it. So this truly really was about 3 ships. Let me get to my notes here. And it's kind of funny how there's like a lot of the episodes have gone like 3, like they've got 3 different storylines. Last couple of episodes, not so much, but this one really kind of took it to an extreme. And I love that we got to see Lower Decks on all the different, like we got, of course, the show is about Lower Decks on a Federation ship, but we get to see Klingons, we get to see Vulcans, and we get to see 2 others, but we'll get to that. We'll get to those. So really, this follows kind of 3 different storylines, and this was primarily a Boimler episode, which we really haven't gotten in a while. Boimler, I think Boimler and Mariner are really the main characters. You have Rutherford and Tindy as kind of those supporting characters, but I really think that Boimler and Mariner are really the main characters there. And so we haven't really had a really good Boimler story, and I think they played well on this. So we have a Boimler story, we have a Klingon story, and we have a Vulcan story. So we'll kind of go with a Boimler story. So pretty much it's set up, and this is the second episode where they didn't even have a teaser before the music credits. It just opened with the credits. I thought that was, I don't know if that's something that they're going to start doing, but just something I noticed. No start date given. but the whole thing is that the Cerritos is going to be traveling through basically just kind of a void, not a starless void like in Voyager, but just a void. There's not a lot of things. They're just traveling, and so Captain Freeman basically has kind of said, "Hey, have some fun, relax, do stuff." So so Boimler, Mariner basically gets to spend time with her mom. Tindy is spending time with Tiana, Dr. Tiana, the chief, and then Rutherford is basically hanging out with I can't remember his name, but basically the chief officer, and then Shax, the main security officer. And then Boimler's like, "Oh, bridge buddies. Okay, that's cool." And I thought that was kind of cool, bridge buddies. And so he's basically trying to find. It's kind of his story of trying to find his own bridge buddies. Now, it's funny because the first one that they hit him up with is Kayshon, the God, what is cannot remember the Darmok at Shalagra dude. And it's so funny because Boimler sits down and he says a line and he's like, "Oh yeah, I took this when I was at the academy," and then he says what is it? Carno in the forest with Milo. And Kayshon is like, "Hey, well, he says it's really hard to keep your weight down when your replicator can make anything you want." And I was like, he totally told the guy he was fat. That is so funny. So now we have a new way to call people fat and not piss off the woke folk around us. Not saying that that's an okay thing to do, but if you've got that little, you just want to be like, you know what, you're fat, and you know what, I'm fat. So because I'm fat, I can tell other people they're fat. So I'm just going to start saying Carno in the forest with Milo. That means you're fat. So he has no luck there. And then he goes in with then he hits up Rutherford and goes, "Well, since you have two bridge buddies, how about you share?" And so they're throwing pottery with Shax and some other people, and Boimler's like, "Oh, Shax, that looks so great. Did you learn that on Bajor?" And Shax just kind of loses it because, of course, he didn't have time for art. He was defending against the Cardassians. So he loses it, and Boimler is totally fails at that. Fighting fascism is a full-time job. Yeah, absolutely. And then he ends up going to the holodeck with Tindy and Tiana, and this is kind of where we get our first. Well, I wouldn't say our first, because we've had other references to other episodes come in, but at least with the Boimler timeline, it's our first reference to something else. And so Tiana and Tindy are climbing El Capitan, and Boimler flies in on his little rocket boots, and he's wearing the sweatshirt that says "Go climb a rock," and it's like it's a total throwback or throughout to Star Trek V, where Captain Kirk is he's climbing El Capitan, and Spock comes up on his rocket boots, and then later on, when Kirk ends up on the Enterprise bridge, he's wearing a sweater that says "Go climb a rock." So I thought that was pretty cool. So and then of course the rocket boots fail, and he's falling, and Tindy's like, "Oh, well, I'm so glad that the safety protocols are on, because so he won't get hurt." And she says, "The safety protocols are on, right?" And Tiana's like, "I don't know, sure." I love that character. I absolutely love her to death. Oh my gosh. And then he finds, so then he gets out of there and he finds Freeman and Mariner, and they're doing, I don't know what what they're doing. They're doing like a phaser fight, and they're yelling and screaming at each other about Mariner's heavy flow or heavy cramps or something like that. And of course, he cannot get out of there any faster. He walks in and he sees them bickering, and he goes back over to the panel. He's like, get me out, get me out, get me out. And then he ends up running into Ransom and two other characters. Or is it three? No, it's two other characters, and pretty much plays that he is in Hawaii. He grew up in Hawaii. So I thought that was pretty funny. Now, of course, there's other things going on, and we'll get to let's move on to the Klingon part. So the Klingons, it's you've got the same type of lower deck scenario. You've got crew members sleeping in a hallway, but not in like nice little bunks, like in little hammock type things. And there's one, and I don't remember them giving him a name. I watched it a couple times. I didn't hear a name, but it was almost like he was a Klingon version of Boimler. And so I was like, okay. And then, they're joking, and then they start joking about, what it might be like to, because he was like, oh, well, my goal is to become a ship captain, and I'm going to try and impress the captain today. Because the first officer and the captain are arguing, and so he'll probably die. So I'm going to be the next first officer. It would just be logical. And so they start teasing him. Logic. It's like the Vulcans are logical. And so as that little scene ends, I hear them say, instead of live long and prosper, it's like avoid death and cower. And I was like, I like that. I don't know if I've heard that elsewhere, but if they did bring it back from something else, I like that they brought that back, because I don't remember it. Of course, we have the fight. When okay, wait a minute. The Klingon Boimler was named Mach. Oh, thank you, closed captions. See, I don't use closed captions, so not that I consider that cheating, but I can't. The only time I can really have like closed captions or lettering on the screen is if I'm watching like some type of movie in a different language, and so I'll read the captions there. But usually, if it's in English, I rarely have the captions on. But cool, Mach. We have a name for the character. So Mach gets on the bridge, and the captain and the first officer are fighting, and of course the first officer dies, gets stabbed in the heart, or in the chest, and Pepto-Bismol comes out, which is a total call out to Star Trek VI, because that was the color of Klingon blood in Star Trek VI. And if you didn't know why the blood was pink, is because Star Trek VI would have gotten an R rating, and so they had to change the color to get that PG-13 rating. Okay, good excuse. I'm partially deaf. Sometimes absolutely, good call. I believe that story, sir. And we have another person watching. I see 2 eyeballs up there. If you can, put your name in the chat. Tell me who you are, where you're tuning in from. Now, of course, he's trying to make a good impression on the captain, and he ends up going, and things happen. He ends up bringing back some beer, or some blood wine, really. And the captain's like, "Hey, when you're done with that, go walk my targ," because he has to pass. What is it? I couldn't really get what he said. It's something about passing a leg, because if he doesn't, he'll end up having gas. So when Mach brings the targ back to the captain, he says, let's see. He says, the leg has been passed and it was an honorable movement. And I was like, that's funny. That's kind of like a fart joke. I thought that was pretty funny. And then of course, Mok becomes the new he becomes the new first officer, and then he starts finding out that the captain has been supplying the Pakleds with weapons and is basically kind of going against all the treaties that the Klingons have with the Federation. But he's kind of just playing along. And so as they beam onto the Pakled ship, the captain says, "Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war," which is a Shakespeare line from Julius Caesar, and it's also a line that Captain Chang said in Star Trek VI. So it's another Shakespeare reference as well as a movie reference. I noticed that when they were on the Pakled ship, the communicator that they were using was the same one that was used in Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4. So you would think that the communicators might change. It's been over 100 years since that time frame. You think the communicators might change, but they didn't, at least for this. And maybe that was just kind of a throw-in, just because it is lower decks and they like to throw little things in, but that was just something I noticed. Let's see. Okay, so let's leave there, and then we'll go over to the Vulcans. So when that little scene in the lower decks of the Klingon ship where they say avoid death and cower, it then goes over to the Vulcans, and it's the Vulcans lower deck. And I think the character's name is Talin. I just wrote it as TA'Lin. That's kind of how I read it. But and of course, I read Mok as a Klingon version of Boimler, but is she a Vulcan version of Boimler, or is she a Vulcan version of Mariner? Because I just have to point out I think all of the way that they played the Vulcans, I think, was like a step beyond what you'd expect with Vulcans. I mean, like, we do get the very serious, very monotone, very logical speaking, but it's like they keep on saying that this character is and it's really like she hasn't lost any control. She's just like, well, I just thought I had this feeling, or I thought that this was I wanted to do this because I thought it would just make this system better. And so it's like one of her shipmates says, "Oh, she's lost all control." The captain says these outbursts will not be tolerated, and they're not. They're like totally not outbursts. I think it was just so funny. One of her crewmates says, "You are clearly unstable," but it's pretty much what's going on with her is that she basically she had used some algorithm to improve the distance of the scanning and notice this one weird thing going on in this area that is a normal thing that goes on, but not for that area. So she's like, "Hey, Captain, maybe we should go check this out." And so he's like, "Yeah, no, I agree, very logical, but these outbursts will not be tolerated." It's just, I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny. So this all three ships end up coming together. Oh, okay. Let's see. She's Vulcan Mariner, in my opinion, especially from at the end where she delivers her oh, yes. Okay. I would agree with that. I would agree. Just the way it was kind of like that up yours type of live long and prosper. What was it? Oh, she also, I had skipped over this. they drew her, at least in my opinion, to look like Valeris from Star Trek Six. I don't know if you got that same one, that same thing, but I was like, God, she looks familiar, and so I think she totally looks like Valeris. So, uh, um, so if we're back on the Pakled ship, and the Klingons are there, and the Pakleds are like, "Oh, we need another bomb," and basically their use of the bomb kind of sparked this energy reading that both the Cerritos and the Vulcan ship read. One thing I liked was, it was funny that Mariner and Freeman were playing like a starship version of Clue, which was pretty funny. And Mariner's line was like, he's like, it's always the cook, because we have replicators. So the cook, of course, why is there a cook on the ship? That's just weird. But anyway, so you have the Klingons and the Pakleds, and they're together, and then the Cerritos shows up, and then the Klingons and the Pakleds start shooting the Cerritos, and then the Vulcans show up, and they all kind of fight back. The Klingons then, the Pakleds said, "Hey, we need more bombs because we use this thing, and because after you use the bomb, we use the bomb, it didn't work." And he's like, "Well, it only has one use," the Klingon captain says. So anyway, so the Klingon captain and the new first officer, Mock, go back to the ship, and start firing on the Cerritos. The new first officer is like, "Hey, this is wrong. You're wrong," and so actually starts fighting the captain and wins. And he wins, and so he's like, "Hey, we're gonna end up going. We're just gonna get out of here. It's not our fight, truly, and we're gonna go back to the Klingon Empire, and then we'll let them deal with all this." Good call. What good call? The Valeris? You'll have to be a little bit. See, this lag time kills me. Anyway, so what was I going to say? And then of course the Marin, or the Cerritos is like, "Hey, they thank the Vulcan ship for coming up, and they're like, "Okay, well, there's nothing here." And Freeman is like, "Seriously? Okay, because she thanks him, and then the captain totally cuts her off. It's like, "Okay, well, you're welcome." He doesn't even say you're welcome. It's just done. There's no more need to communicate, and they close. So also during the fight, I forgot to mention this. During the fight, we actually see the lower decks of the Pakled, which I thought was pretty funny, because there's four. Again, there's always four. You've got the Pakled, and one's like, "I'm hungry," and then the other one's like, "Maybe you should eat something," and he goes, "You're smart." I thought that was pretty funny. And then let's see. So let's see. So the ship leaves. The Pakleds, they end up leaving, because they end up getting one of their little wings thingies gets shot off, and then it ends. We're on the Cerritos, and Freeman's like, "Hey, we're gonna have to let the Federation know. So now we know who's been supplying the Pakleds weapons and all that kind of stuff." So back on the ship, back on the Vulcan ship, since Tallinn has an inability to control her emotions, she is being reassigned to a Federation starship, and so she's like, "Well, I really don't think that's necessary," and he's like, "Well, absolutely." So she's seeing it as maybe as a punishment. But which Starfleet ship is she going to be? Are we going to see her in the next episode, or maybe are we going to see her next season? So is this going to be a new character that we're going to see on a regular basis because she's being assigned to the Cerritos? I don't know. I think so. I think that's kind of where we're headed. And probably my favorite part now, because this has just been a really fun episode. You know, we get a good Boimler story. We get to see the lower, you know, they play with the lower decks, and they all kind of ties into this. And so the one thing, okay, I really hope she gets transferred to the Cerritos. Yes, I totally think she should. I think that would be a great, because I'd love to see her and Mariner and Boimler, and maybe because she's like the Vulcan version of Mariner, maybe we'll see like a love interest for Boimler. I don't know. Yes. Okay. And yes, it was Lower Decks, Vulcan, and Valeris. Okay. Now, the one thing I forgot to get back to was Boimler's storyline. So as the battle is going on, Boimler and because Boimler ends up going to a luau because, of course, he's from Hawaii with those two guys and Ransom. Well, it comes out that he says, Boimler says that I'm really from Modesto. And I don't know if we ever find out that he's actually from Modesto, like from the first season. I know that the California class, I know that there was some symbolism behind that, but we do find out that he's from Modesto. And I love how he kind of points out that, well, you know, it's kind of like, you know, because the other people find out that they're all from moons, that it was actually Ransom who started the whole Hawaii thing, because he said he was from Hawaii because his first officer was from Hawaii, and then it just kind of stuck. And then everyone's else like, oh, you know, he's like, I was really born on the moon. And then another character is like, so was I. Oh, I went to this high school. And then this other character is like, oh, well, I grew up on this moon. So now you got this moon group and Boimler. And Boimler's like, well, you know, Modesto can kind of be seen as the moon to Sacramento, which I thought that was kind of funny. But he's still kind of left out. So they're back on the bar of the Cerritos, and then this, I would say a cadet, because it looked like he was dressed in cadet outfits from not the goofy Wesley Crusher cadet uniform, but the later season cadet uniform. Anyway, he says, "Oh, you know, Commander Ransom told me that you know that you're really organized and that I should help." And so Boimler's like, he feels like he may not be part of that group, but he's getting recognition from Ransom, the first officer, which I thought was so good. So now that I've covered that, we get back to what Rob just posted. We get a full minute, probably over a full minute of the lower decks of a Borg ship. My favorite part of the episode. Like, and it's so funny because they're just in their pods, just standing there. They're just standing there. And the little things are like the little, you know, zapper things are going, and nothing's happening for a full minute. And of course, the credits are rolling. Probably my favorite episode, or my favorite part of the episode. Now it's on. Now it says Borg lower decks, and it says 90182. So is that supposed to be a play off of 90218? Or yeah, was it 90182 equals 90218, which is, you know, an 80s teenage, where they were all really 30 years old, drama. So yeah, laughed out loud. Yeah, it was so funny. I thought that was a really good, that was a good call on the writers on that one. Oh yeah. And then of course, what comes out when Boimler is saying, "Hey, you know, I'm not really from Hawaii." It's like, I don't want to die in a Hawaiian shirt. I'm from Modesto. Oh my God, that was just hilarious. Okay. That's all I have for this episode. I really enjoyed this episode. I'm glad that the season's getting better, and I'm really sad that the season is ending. So next Thursday will be the last episode of Lower Decks. I think it only has 10 episodes. That's what it was last season. So I'm only expecting 10 this season. But yeah, so I'm hoping they end on a really, really good note. Yeah, Rob, just such a well-written, funny, enjoyable episode. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that. If you haven't subscribed, liked, shared, commented, whatever, do all those social media things, because I know a lot of people watch these episodes after they have gone live. And our scheduled episodes, I'm going to talk about that in about 30 minutes. So I'll be online at 6 p.m. Pacific time. The reason I'm going live early is because I have to get on an airplane and I have to leave here at 8, and I still haven't fully packed yet. I'm mostly packed, but not fully. So there we go. There's that. So until the next episode, live long and prosper.